Good morning, everybody. Today is 27th day in the month of April 2022. My name is Heritage Adisa, markets analyst at Hot Forex. Quickly, as usual, we'll check through the markets, find out what the overall mood is in the market, if what the drivers are, what the main themes are in the market, if they provide opportunities, and then how we can take advantage of it. Please remember that this is just a communication material, and nothing in this communication contains or should be considered as investment advice or investment recommendation. Users acknowledge that investment in FX and CFD products is characterized by a certain degree of uncertainty, and any investment of this nature involves a high level of risk for which users will be responsible and liable. Now, what we have this morning in terms of the overall environment in the markets is another mixed, mostly mixed start to the day, right? First of all, we'll get to that in a bit now, but I had this written down earlier. I said, hot inflation data in Australia sees calls for the Reserve Bank of Australia hike next week. Early in the day, we had Australian data. We had Australian data, inflation data coming higher, beats expectations by margin as well. Apart from that, the main measure that the RBA always pays the most attention to, this RBA trimmed mean, what they pay attention to the most, right? Beats expectations of 3.4 to 3.7, which is above, the RBA's target band. The RBA has said that their target band is between 2 to 3%. Now that we've seen print above this, now it sends market participants, or it had market participants calling for a hike in the RBA meeting, even their next week's meeting, this one in the month of May. Now, before, the expectation has been that they will hike in June, or expectation has been for a hike in June, but now a May hike has also come back into the flow, and that has also seen the Australian dollar jump up, as well. Remember, in the last meeting, they said everything was positive in terms of the economy, but we'd like to see further evidence in inflation as well as the jobs market before they look to hike rates, and this is one of the things that market participants are latching on to so far. And then I had written out earlier. I said that has seen some strength in the Australian dollar and has jumped up to the top of the majors. Now, while still keeping its overall strength, the dollar also starts the day a little bit lower against the commodity currencies. That's the AUD, CAD, and NZD, but higher against most of the other currencies, including even the euro and the pound. Dollar index is up about 0.19% so far. In Europe, the talk between Russia and Ukraine have not really, yielded anything tangible. And then even now, we've had Russia also halt gas supplies to Poland as well as Bulgaria, which clearly, is going to even tighten the oil market even more. And clearly is not a good input for Europe generally, particularly the euro, and even an extension of the pound. I said that, yes, overall market themes, overall negativity in terms of slowdown in growth from Europe, from China, aggressive Federal Reserve hike as well, all of those things still weighs on market sentiment generally. But today we are seeing a mostly mixed start to the day generally. While commodities are trading mixed, you look at the Asian equities, they're down. You look at the European equities, some of them up, some down, right? Euro stocks, for example, starting lower, and the US futures are mostly high, but most of those high or upside are mostly looking like pullback rather than even a reversal, something like we had, in yesterday's session. I said in FX, the Australian dollar leads the majors, right? Clearly spurred by high inflation and RBA hike expectations, right? And then the NZ and CAD also follow suit. While on the other hand, you have the Japanese yen and the Swiss franc lagging amongst the majors. I said these flows are somewhat similar to what we had yesterday, where we started a little positive and ended up on the negative side. And thus, it means that we should be more cautious because market risks remain very, very dominant, and a shift later in the day would not be a surprise, considering that we are entering into month-end trading as well. Equities trade mostly mixed, although with a downside bias, right? The upside we're seeing in US pulses or US equities are mostly pullbacks. Oil prices really did not react to that report from Russia, right? But I mean, that, yes, could provide some form of tailwind for oil prices, but so far it's trading mostly flat on the day. The VIX is a little bit lower, clearly because US equities have pushed a little bit higher into this session, but overall it remains overly elevated, while the bond market also remains overly supported as well, in line with the current overall negative flow that we've had recently. Having said that, If you want to now look at trading, you want to look at pairing the AUD in terms of strength against something like the JPY CHF, in as much as the current flows in terms of strength and weaknesses make sense, but because the overall environment in the market still breeds some negatives, right? That clearly could support having currencies later in the day. So I would prefer, we look at AUD against the likes of pounds, against the likes of euro, which would be better options for me. And I talk about a few levels here: euro AUD from a break and retest of 1.48, and then pounds AUD from a retest rather of 1.76, or a break and retest of 1.75. Could be interesting to look out for further downside on that particular one. Lights calendar ahead: the BOC, Governor Mark Lem on the wires, and then EC President Lagarde as well on the wires. Now, this is what I'm talking about. You look at the US future side, right? Today's session, we've seen a little bit of upside, push upside, but clearly this looks like, this is more of a pullback, right? Considering the kind of moves that we've had so far. And you look at other bounces like on the, Japanese yen side now, mostly like a pullback, right? Previous lows, considering the kind of downside that we've had so far. You look at even the FTSE as well, looks more like pullback compared to the downside. So we can't really, take out the upside that we're seeing so far. But because the overall environment still breeds negatives, right? The current upside we're seeing doesn't really have any particular catalyst latching onto it or behind it. It makes it a little bit more tricky to try and latch onto. So if the VIX, yes, we're seeing a little bit of downside in today's session in line with the slight strength we see in equities, but nothing to carry to take us off focus. Oil market, like I said, are mostly flat, right? Really, really not going anywhere so far today, despite the reports that we had in terms of Russia banning gas supplies to Poland as well as Bulgaria. Dollar index is a little bit up in today's session as well, still well elevated on the back of aggressive Federal Reserve hikes being priced in and expectations for hikes, even in the next meeting up to 50 basis points. Clearly, that has seen the dollar index push up some more, and it keeps being supported. Although on currency side, where you have AUD, NZD, and CAD needs to be supported, we've not seen the dollar push up against it, but it's way better off against the euro as well as the other safe haven assets. Now, if you want to look at this in terms of a trade, you look at the likes of AUD versus JPY, for example. Yes, it's pushed higher, but I'm just saying, considering the kind of downside I've seen so far, I mean, this is just like a pullback, right? I missed all of the things. I can see that we found a little bit of resistance around 92, around previous highs, just very, very cleanly around here. Right? So clearly that just gives you an idea of, the kind of sentiments around this particular pair. You look at AUD versus CHF as well, similar story there. Right. Yes, even though we've cleared out this key level that I marked out earlier, we had a level marked out earlier from way back, right? I mean, previous lows going back to late March, as well as, around 11th of April. If we've really struggled at this level, even though we cleared it out to the upside, but we've not really seen so much momentum there, and we're struggling at yesterday's high. So clearly, I'm not really interested in looking to jumping on this, right? You look at AUD USD as well, similar story there, right? I mean, the kind of upside we've seen today is mostly, it looks like a pullback. Nothing says we can't retest this previous lows and then push higher, but in terms of convictions, it's really, really light there. So what I would look out for, I like pounds versus AUD. I like pounds versus AUD in terms of the weakness we're seeing in pounds. There's been worries about the UK's debts increasing as well as slowdown in terms of the growth there, worries in Europe, right? Even less hawkishness from the BOE. So clearly that's one that is giving me a little bit of concern in terms of the pound. That's why I would like to still sell pounds against the strength in the AED if I'm looking to take anything at all. What I'm looking out for will be a retest of 1.75. 1.75 is this yesterday's lows as well. You can see was also the previous lows going back to the 22nd of April, very close to the highs as well, going back to the 20th of April as well. So any rotation back towards this level, really, I mean, will be interesting for me in terms of looking for further downside on this particular pair. Remember that pounds is one of our, one of our trade ideas for the week. We're looking to sell pounds for the week, particularly against the dollar. But I mean, this is not a bad idea as well. You look at euro versus AUD as well. Finally, just quickly, let's see, euro AUD. Just look at that euro AUD, right? As another one on my mind as well in terms of biases and then ideas. Now, this particular one as well, what I would really like to see on this one would be either a break below this 1.48. If I see a break below 1.48 and a retest of this level, previous yesterday's lows, that would make it interesting for me. Alternatively, if I can get that will really be what I'm looking out for until I get a break below this and a retest before I look to get into this. For pounds AUD, the retest of this will be interesting. Apart from that, if you can also get a break below this 1 point, this is 1.75. That would also be another way to look out for it. So if I get a retest of this, target should be around here. If I get a breakout and retest of this as well, I also look out for next lows or next support level around 1.7400. So that's really it in terms of what we have. Still sentiment, still very much fragile. We want to also be very careful and watchful of the sentiment going forward. And in terms of the calendar, it's really, really light one. Yes, ECB President Lagarde on the wires, but apart from that, we don't really have so much going on. We're approaching month's end. Federal Reserve meeting later in the week, next week as well. We might get push and pull in terms of the overall mood in the market. But for now, keep it simple, manage your risk. And then if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you. Do enjoy the rest of your trading session. Bye for now.